When a black man's daughter is kidnapped by a ruthless gang, the traffickers assume their crimes will be ignored, just like they always are. But they're dead wrong. What they don't realize is that her father has the skills, determination, and courage to dismantle their entire operation. This is a story of resilience, corruption, and a father's relentless fight to save his daughter. The smell of sizzling onions and garlic filled Nathan Cole's modest kitchen as he stirred a pan of vegetables on the stovetop. Cooking was one of the few domestic routines he had picked up since leaving his high-stakes military life. It gave him a sense of normalcy, even if only for a few moments. He was just about to reach for a spice jar when his phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit up with a familiar name, Layla. "Hey, sweetheart," Nathan greeted, a rare smile creeping across his face. "Hi, Dad." Layla's voice was bright and full of energy, though there was something faintly off, almost strained, beneath her cheerful tone. "I'm on my way to the hotel now. The college visit was amazing. You'd love the campus." Nathan leaned against the counter, holding the phone to his ear. "I'm glad to hear that. Everything goes smoothly?" "Yeah," Layla hesitated, her voice trailing off for a moment. "Well, mostly. This guy at the rest stop earlier was acting weird, but I'm fine now." Nathan froze, his military instincts flaring. "Weird how? Did you call anyone? Report it." "Dad, I'm fine," Layla replied, a little more firmly. "You always worry too much." Before Nathan could respond, a noise in the background caught his attention, a faint, muffled voice, followed by what sounded like hurried footsteps. Layla's breathing quickened. "Dad!" Her voice dropped, trembling. "Something's not right." "What's going on, Layla?" Nathan's voice turned sharp, commanding. "Talk to me! Are you safe?" A scuffle erupted on the other end of the line, voices shouting, Layla screaming, and then the distinct sound of something crashing to the ground. "Layla!" Nathan shouted, gripping the phone tightly. "Dad! Help!" Layla's scream pierced through the phone, followed by more commotion. And then, silence. Nathan stared at the phone, his heart pounding like it hadn't in years. The call had ended. The room felt suffocatingly quiet, but his mind was already racing. He dropped the spoon he was holding, sprinted to his laptop, and opened a tracking app he had reluctantly convinced Layla to install months ago. The screen loaded slowly, his fingers drumming on the countertop with mounting impatience. Finally, the app revealed her last known location, a rest stop off Highway 14, just outside the town of Coldwater. His stomach sank. Coldwater was notorious, a place whispered about for its deeply ingrained racism and history of violent hate crimes. Nathan clenched his jaw, closing the laptop with a snap. His pulse steadied, his focus narrowing. Whatever had just happened, he wasn't going to wait for answers. Nathan paced around his bedroom, methodically throwing necessities into a worn duffel bag, first aid supplies, a tactical flashlight, extra phone chargers, and his concealed handgun. His mind was running through every possible scenario. He couldn't shake the sound of her scream. He glanced at the tracking app again. The pin hadn't moved from Coldwater's rest stop. The timestamp showed the phone had gone offline just 15 minutes earlier. He took a deep breath, his thoughts flashing back to Coldwater's reputation. He hadn't set foot near that place in years, not since a close military buddy, a black man like him, had been harassed there while passing through. Coldwater wasn't just unfriendly, it was a powder keg of hate waiting for a spark. Grabbing his car keys, Nathan made one last call to the Coldwater Police Department. The voice on the other end was slow, condescending. "Missing, huh? How old is she?" the officer drawled. 18, Nathan replied, his voice tense. "Well, she's probably off with some boy, enjoying herself. Happens all the time. You sure you're not overreacting?" Nathan gripped the phone tighter, fighting the urge to explode. "Listen, officer, she didn't just vanish. I heard her scream. There's been a struggle. Check the damn rest stop near Highway 14. "We'll look into it," the officer replied lazily. The line clicked dead. Nathan slammed the phone down, his frustration boiling over. He knew they weren't going to help. He couldn't count on anyone but himself. Within minutes, he was in his car, tearing down the highway. The night stretched ahead of him, dark and foreboding, but Nathan's focus remained razor-sharp. The rest stop was eerily deserted when Nathan arrived. A single flickering light above the gas station cast long shadows across the parking lot. He parked his car and stepped out, scanning the area like a hawk. Layla's car was there. The driver's side door hung open, and the engine was cold. Nathan's chest tightened as he approached, his eyes locking onto her phone lying face down on the asphalt. He picked it up, the cracked screen reflecting the dim light. Nearby, a torn piece of her jacket fluttered in the wind, caught on a bush. The signs of a struggle were undeniable. Footprints scuffed the ground, leading toward the edge of the lot. Nathan's stomach churned. He turned toward the gas station where a nervous-looking attendant stood behind the counter peering through the glass. Nathan marched inside, his movements deliberate. "You work here?" he asked, his voice low but commanding. The attendant nodded quickly. Yeah, just started my shift." "You see anything? A young black girl, maybe around 18, taken from the lot." The man hesitated, his eyes darting nervously. "There was a van. Black-tinted windows, left in a hurry about 20 minutes ago." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Which way?" The attendant pointed toward the highway. "West, toward Coldwater." Nathan nodded, his expression grim. He turned and walked out, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. Back in his car, Nathan gripped the steering wheel tightly. His mind was made up. Layla was out there, and nothing, not a racist town, corrupt police, or dangerous men, was going to stop him from bringing her home. The highway was empty except for Nathan's car speeding down the asphalt, his hands gripping the steering wheel like a vice. He pulled over at a rest stop miles from Coldwater, where he knew he could get a decent internet connection. Parking his car in the shadows, Nathan opened his laptop, the screen's glow casting a sharp light across his face. He logged into an encrypted server, a relic from his military days, and reached out to an old contact, a tech-savvy intelligence officer. Within minutes, he had access to nearby traffic camera feeds. Nathan scrolled through footage, fast-forwarding, until he spotted the black van with tinted windows speeding away from the rest stop. "There you are," Nathan muttered under his breath. The van headed west, deeper into the outskirts of Coldwater, toward an industrial area infamous for gang activity. As the video replayed on his screen, Nathan's mind wandered to a memory. He could see himself in the backyard with Layla, teaching her how to break out of a chokehold. "Never underestimate anyone," he had told her as she struggled against his grip. "If they get their hands on you, they'll expect you to panic. Stay calm, think, and strike when they least expect it." Just the memory cut deep. Despite all the precautions he had drilled into her, Nathan felt the sting of guilt. He hadn't wanted her to feel suffocated, but he should never have let her go alone. Shaking the thought, Nathan focused on the road ahead. The van's destination was becoming clearer. Whoever had taken Layla wasn't going to hide for long. Nathan pulled over into a secluded spot and reached for his phone. He scrolled through his contacts until he found Marcus Turner, his old squadmate. Marcus, now a private investigator, had built a reputation for handling dangerous cases with a level of discretion Nathan could trust. "Marcus, it's me," Nathan said, his voice low and urgent. "Damn, Cole, been a while. What's going on?" Nathan didn't waste time. He explained Layla's kidnapping and the gang's connection to Coldwater. Marcus, who had dealt with similar cases before, immediately caught on. "This sounds like the Brotherhood," Marcus said grimly. "They're a local white supremacist group heavy into human trafficking. Young women, especially black girls, are prime targets. They're ruthless, Cole. This isn't just about money for them. It's about control." Nathan's grip on the phone tightened. "Do you have anything on their operations, safe houses, leadership?" Marcus hesitated. "The Brotherhood has local police in their pocket. Even if you have evidence, they'll bury it. But I've got a few leads. I'll send you the address of a bar where some of their guys hang out. You might find someone who knows where they taken Layla, but be careful, Cole. These aren't amateurs." "Careful isn't an option," Nathan replied, his voice like steel. "Fine. I'll send what I have. And Cole, don't do anything stupid." Nathan hung up, his mind already made up. He didn't have time for patience. The bar was exactly what Nathan expected, a dimly lit, rundown hole in the wall, filled with the stench of smoke and cheap beer. He parked a block away, approached the entrance, and stepped inside, scanning the room. A jukebox played a country song in the corner, barely audible over the murmur of voices. Nathan approached the bar counter, where a burly man with a tattoo of a Confederate flag on his forearm was drying glasses. Nathan leaned in, his tone calm but commanding. "I'm looking for someone," Nathan said, sliding a photo of Layla across the counter. "My daughter, she was taken. I was told this place might have answers." The bartender's eyes flicked to the photo, then back to Nathan. His lips curled into a smirk. "Can't help you, pal." Nathan's hand shot out, grabbing the bartender's wrist with a grip that spoke volumes about his strength. "You sure about that?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. The smirk faded. The bartender glanced nervously around the room before muttering, "Maybe you should leave before you get yourself hurt." Nathan didn't flinch. His stare bore into the man, unyielding. "You don't want me to ask again," he warned. Before the bartender could respond, the door swung open and a group of men walked in. They were loud, rowdy, and unmistakably part of the Brotherhood, their tattoos and demeanor giving them away. Nathan's gaze sharpened as he listened to their conversation. "The new girl? She's already been sent to the safe house," one of them said, laughing. "Boss wants her ready for the auction tomorrow." Nathan's stomach churned, but he kept his expression neutral. The bartender, sensing trouble, pulled his arm free and stepped back. "You need to go," he said, his voice more forceful this time. One of the gang members noticed Nathan lingering at the counter. "Hey, who's this guy?" he asked, approaching. Nathan turned to face him, his stance casual but ready. "Just looking for my daughter," he said evenly. The man sneered. "Wrong place, buddy." He reached out to shove Nathan, but before his hand made contact, Nathan grabbed his wrist and twisted it sharply, sending the man to the ground with a yelp of pain. The bar erupted into chaos. 2 more gang members charged at Nathan, but he dispatched them with precise, calculated moves. A punch to the throat, a kick to the knee. His military training shone through, turning the fight into a display of efficiency and brutality. As the last man hit the floor, Nathan grabbed one by the collar, dragging him upright. "Where's the safe house?" he demanded. The man stammered, fear etched across his face. "North End abandoned warehouse by the train tracks." Nathan released him, letting the man crumple to the ground. The sound of sirens in the distance warned him it was time to leave. He exited through the back alley, his mind set on the next step. Layla was closer, but so was the danger. Will Nathan be able to track Layla down and save her in time? And what do they plan to do with Layla? Give this video a like and stay tuned to find out. The moon hung low in the sky as Nathan parked his car at the edge of a dense forest, a safe distance from the farmhouse. He killed the engine and stepped out, the chill of the night air biting against his skin. The headlights of the black van he had been tracking were dimly visible near the entrance of the property. Nathan crouched behind a tree, raising a pair of military-grade binoculars to his eyes. The farmhouse was surrounded by high fencing, with several armed guards patrolling the perimeter. Their movements were methodical, and the sight of rifles slung over their shoulders made it clear that this was no ordinary hideout. He focused the binoculars on the front porch, where 2 burly men dragged a young woman from the van, her head lolled to the side, her body limp and unresponsive. Behind her, another girl stumbled out, barely able to stand, her eyes glassy. Nathan's fists clenched at the sight. The scene brought his worst fears to life. This was no random abduction. This was a carefully organized trafficking operation. From his vantage point, Nathan scanned the area for vulnerabilities in their defenses. He noted a gap in the fence near the back of the property, and the way one of the guards lingered near a blind spot behind a storage shed. His mind worked quickly, formulating a plan. As he adjusted his binoculars, a flicker of movement caught his attention. Inside the farmhouse, through a grimy window, he saw shadows moving. More women being held, their silhouettes slumped in chairs or against walls. Nathan's resolve hardened. He whispered to himself, "I'm coming for you, Layla." The wind rustled the leaves as Nathan crept through the forest, sticking to the shadows. His boots made no sound on the soft earth as he approached the gap in the fence. Pulling out a small multi-tool from his pocket, he quickly and quietly widened the opening enough to slip through. Inside the compound, Nathan kept low, moving with the precision of a predator. The first guard stood near the storage shed, smoking a cigarette and scrolling through his phone. Nathan approached silently from behind, placing a hand over the guard's mouth and delivering a swift, calculated blow to the side of his neck. The man crumpled without a sound. Nathan dragged the unconscious guard behind the shed, relieving him of his radio and knife. He continued toward the farmhouse, where two guards stood chatting by the porch. He couldn't risk a direct approach, so he circled around to the back. He found an unlocked window and climbed inside, landing softly on the creaking wooden floor. The stench hit him immediately, sweat, blood, and despair. The dimly lit room was filled with cages, some holding terrified young women. Others sat huddled together, trembling. Nathan scanned the room, his breath catching when he saw a familiar scarf lying in a pile of belongings near the corner. Layla's scarf. He grabbed it, holding it for a moment before tucking it into his pocket. The sight of the women steeled his resolve further. He approached the nearest cage, speaking in a hushed tone. "I'm here to help. Stay quiet." One of the women looked up, her eyes wide with fear. She shook her head frantically and pointed toward the door. Footsteps. Nathan froze, listening. The heavy thud of boots grew louder, heading in his direction. He darted behind a stack of crates just as two guards entered the room carrying flashlights. "You hear that?" one of them muttered. "Nah, probably the girls whimpering again," the other replied. Nathan waited, his body tense, until the guards turned their backs. Moving like a shadow, he took them down in quick succession, one with a chokehold, the other with a precise strike to the temple. But then a piercing alarm shattered the silence. Red lights flashed throughout the compound and shouts erupted from outside. Nathan cursed under his breath. He had to move fast. The farmhouse erupted into chaos as guards poured in from all directions. Nathan grabbed one of the radios he had taken earlier and listened to the frantic chatter. "Intruder in the main building. Secure the women." Nathan ducked into a side hallway, his mind racing. He couldn't free the captives now without putting them all in more danger. Forcing himself to focus on the bigger picture, he made his way to the exit. Bursting through the back door, Nathan found himself in the yard. Gunshots cracked through the night, and he dived behind a stack of barrels for cover. Peeking out, he spotted a truck parked near the barn. "Perfect," he muttered. He sprinted toward the truck, zigzagging to avoid being an easy target. One of the guards spotted him and raised his rifle, but Nathan was faster. He threw a knife with deadly accuracy, hitting the man in the shoulder and forcing him to drop his weapon. Reaching the truck, Nathan yanked open the door and hot-wired it in seconds. The engine roared to life, and he slammed on the gas, plowing through the compound's gates. Guards fired at the vehicle, bullets ricocheting off the metal, but Nathan didn't stop. Once he was a safe distance away, Nathan pulled over in a secluded spot and dragged an injured guard from the back of the truck. He had knocked the man out during the fight, but now it was time for answers. Nathan tied the man's hands and leaned in close, his voice icy. "Where is Layla? Where is the special auction?" The guard's face twisted with fear. "You're too late, man. She's already on her way to the auction. Big buyers, high profile, you'll never make it in time." Nathan tightened his grip on the man's shirt. "Where is the auction?" "Abandoned hotel outside Coldwater," the man stammered. "It's Razor's operation. He'll kill her if you get too close." Nathan's jaw clenched, his eyes burning with fury. Then he'll die before he gets the chance. Nathan left the guard tied to a tree and drove off into the night. The location of the auction now burned into his mind. Layla's life was hanging by a thread, but he wasn't going to let anyone cut it. Nathan drove into Coldwater with the morning light just beginning to break over the horizon. The air was heavy with an eerie stillness, and the small police station sat in the center of town like an ominous reminder of authority gone wrong. Determined to leverage the law, Nathan walked through the station doors, his military demeanor commanding attention. He approached the front desk, presenting himself as a desperate father. "My daughter has been kidnapped. I've tracked her to a trafficking ring operating right here in Coldwater. I have evidence." The desk officer, a disinterested older man with graying hair, gave him a slow, dismissive glance before gesturing toward the sheriff's office. "You'll want to talk to Sheriff Barker." Nathan pushed through the door, finding Sheriff Barker leaning back in his chair, sipping coffee. Barker, a burly man with a smug air of entitlement, listened as Nathan laid out his findings. But the more Nathan spoke, the more Barker's eyes narrowed. "You're making some big accusations here," Barker said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Trafficking in Coldwater? Sounds like you've been watching too many movies." Nathan stepped forward, his anger barely contained. "This isn't a joke. I have evidence of your town's connection to a trafficking ring, and I won't stop until my daughter is safe." Barker smirked, leaning forward. "Here's some advice, Mr. Cole. You're better off leaving Coldwater. People who ask too many questions around here tend to disappear." Nathan realized then that Barker wasn't just unhelpful, he was part of the problem. Before Nathan could respond, 2 deputies entered the room. "Sheriff?" one of them said, glancing at Nathan suspiciously. Barker waved a hand. "Detain him. He's interfering with police operations." Nathan was handcuffed and escorted to a holding cell, his mind racing. As soon as the deputies left, he pulled out his phone, which they had neglected to confiscate. He quickly texted Marcus, attaching the files and photos he had collected so far. "Need you to get this out," Nathan typed. "The sheriff is in on it." Within minutes, Marcus replied, "Got it. Sit tight. I'll create a way out." Nathan sat back, his frustration mounting. Time was slipping away. But he wasn't about to give up. Nathan didn't have to wait long before chaos erupted in the station. Alarms blared, and the sound of shouting echoed through the halls. He stood and approached the bars of his cell, watching as deputies scrambled toward the exits. His phone vibrated with a message from Marcus. "Fire alarm triggered remotely. Cameras down for 10 mins. You're clear to move." Nathan smirked. "Good work, Marcus." He picked the lock on the cell door with a paperclip he'd found under the bench, slipping into the hallway undetected. The fire alarm continued to screech, providing the perfect cover as he navigated the station. He moved quickly but carefully, keeping to the shadows. As he approached the evidence room, he spotted a lone deputy standing guard. Nathan crept up behind him, delivering a precise strike to the back of the neck, rendering the man unconscious. Inside the evidence room, Nathan found his belongings, including his concealed firearm. Rearmed and ready, he exited the station through the rear door, stepping into the alleyway. But his escape wasn't unnoticed for long. 2 deputies spotted him as he darted toward the parking lot. "There he is!" one of them shouted, drawing his weapon. Nathan reacted instinctively, using the corner of the building as cover. He returned fire with precision, aiming to disable rather than kill. One deputy dropped his weapon, clutching his injured shoulder, while the other hesitated long enough for Nathan to sprint to a nearby car. Hot-wiring the vehicle took seconds, a skill honed during his military years. The engine roared to life, and Nathan sped out of the lot, weaving through the streets of Coldwater as sirens wailed behind him. He took a series of sharp turns, eventually losing the pursuing squad cars. Pulling into an abandoned service station on the outskirts of town, he checked his phone. Marcus had sent a pin to a location, an old warehouse rumored to house the gang's records. Nathan gripped the steering wheel, his resolve unshaken. "I'm coming for you, Layla," he muttered under his breath before driving off toward the warehouse. The warehouse loomed ahead, its corrugated metal walls rusting and pockmarked with bullet holes. Nathan parked a few blocks away, approaching on foot. He circled the building, noting the lack of guards. It was oddly quiet. Finding an unlocked side door, Nathan slipped inside, his movements silent and deliberate. The interior was dimly lit, cluttered with crates and filing cabinets. The faint hum of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Nathan began rifling through the files, scanning for anything that could lead him to Layla. He came across shipment records, names, and destinations, all pointing to a large-scale trafficking network. His stomach churned when he found a list titled Premium Lots. Layla's name was there, highlighted in bold. Next to it was a note, Auction, 10 p.m. tomorrow. The words felt like a punch to the gut. Nathan stared at the paper, his blood boiling. These people didn't just see Layla as a person, they saw her as a product. He pulled out his phone, snapping pictures of the documents and uploading them to a secure server. Marcus needed to get this to the authorities, real authorities, not the corrupt local police. As he continued searching, Nathan found a map marking the location of the auction, an abandoned hotel on the outskirts of Coldwater. His phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. Evidence received, uploading to trusted contacts. What's next? Nathan typed back, The auction. I have the location. Marcus replied instantly, I'll send backup. Nathan pocketed his phone. His jaw set. Backup or not, he wasn't going to wait. Time was running out, and Layla's life depended on him. As he exited the warehouse, Nathan paused to take a deep breath. The stakes were higher than ever, but he was ready. Nathan parked his stolen delivery van a mile away from the compound, taking a moment to inspect his disguise. The tan uniform of a courier service fit well enough, and the fake ID clipped to his chest looked convincing under a quick glance. With a deep breath, he started the van and drove toward Razor's mansion, hidden deep in the woods. The compound loomed ahead, a sprawling estate surrounded by a high chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. A gatehouse stood at the entrance, where 2 guards armed with assault rifles monitored incoming vehicles. Nathan slowed the van as he approached, forcing calm into his body language. The guard stepped forward, squinting as he motioned for Nathan to roll down the window. "Delivery," Nathan said, holding up the clipboard with forged documents. "Package for Razor, special order." The guard frowned, inspecting the papers. "We weren't told about a delivery." Nathan shrugged, feigning annoyance. "Not my job to tell you what your boss orders. You want me to turn around and explain to him why his shipment didn't arrive?" The guard hesitated, glancing at his partner, then waved him through. "Fine. Pull up to the side entrance and unload." Nathan nodded, giving a small smile that masked his growing tension. As the gate opened and he drove into the compound, he silently thanked his years of military training for the ability to stay calm under pressure. He parked the van by the side entrance and stepped out, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. 2 more guards loitered nearby, watching him with mild suspicion. Nathan opened the back of the van, revealing empty crates he had scrounged up to sell the illusion. "Where do you want this?" he asked, keeping his voice steady. "Storage room, first door on the left," one of the guards said, losing interest as he waved Nathan off. Nathan grabbed a crate and carried it inside, his sharp eyes scanning the layout of the compound. He noted the location of security cameras, guard stations, and the heavy doors leading to the basement. His heart clenched as he passed by a dimly lit hallway and caught a glimpse of young women being herded into a room. He couldn't see their faces, but the sight fueled his determination. Layla was here, and he was one step closer to bringing her home. Nathan ditched the crate as soon as he was out of sight, slipping into the shadows of the compound. His movements were silent and precise, honed from years of stealth missions. He navigated the hallways, staying out of view of the guards and cameras. As he neared the main hall, voices grew louder. Peering through a vent, Nathan saw a group of gang members gathered around a table, reviewing documents and cash. Razor stood at the head of the table, a towering man with a cruel expression and a distinctive scar running down his cheek. Nathan's fists clenched as Razor spoke. "The buyers will arrive tomorrow night. Make sure everything is in place. No screw-ups." One of the men handed Razor a clipboard. "All the girls are prepped, boss. The high bidders are already lined up for the premium lots." Razor smirked, flipping through the pages. "Good. The new girl, Layla, will fetch a high price. She's exactly what they're looking for." Nathan's blood ran cold as Razor continued. "Keep her sedated. Don't let her wake up until the auction starts." Nathan shifted his position, angling for a better view. His breath caught when he saw Layla. She was seated in the corner of the room, her head slumped forward, clearly drugged. Her clothes were disheveled, and her wrists were bound. Razor walked over to her, tilting her chin up to inspect her face. "She's perfect," he said, his voice dripping with malice. Nathan gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stay calm. Acting now would jeopardize everything. He needed a plan to take down Razor and his operation without putting Layla in more danger. He continued observing, noting the number of guards, the layout of the room, and the potential escape routes. Every detail mattered, and he couldn't afford to miss anything. As the gang members dispersed, Nathan retreated into the shadows, his mind racing. Nathan's careful retreat was interrupted when a guard rounded the corner and spotted him. "Hey, what are you doing here?" the guard barked, raising his weapon. Without hesitation, Nathan lunged forward, disarming the man with a swift motion. He delivered a powerful strike to the guard's temple, knocking him out cold. But the commotion had alerted others. Alarms blared, and footsteps thundered through the hallways. Nathan darted toward an open window, vaulting through it and landing in the bushes outside. The compound erupted into chaos as guards searched for the intruder. Nathan weaved through the woods, his years of survival training guiding him through the darkness. The sound of barking dogs and shouting grew fainter as he put distance between himself and the compound. Finally, he stopped to catch his breath, leaning against a tree. His heart pounded, but his resolve was stronger than ever. Layla was alive, and now he knew where she was. "I'll be back," Nathan whispered to himself, his voice filled with determination. "And when I come back, Razor's going down." Nathan sat in the corner of a run-down motel room, his laptop open on the rickety desk. The faint sound of traffic outside was the only noise as he connected with Marcus over a secure video call. Marcus's face appeared on the screen, his expression grim but focused. "I've got the layout of Razor's compound," Marcus said, sending over the blueprints. "The auction's happening in the ballroom. Security will be tight, but there's a service entrance on the east side they'll likely overlook. You'll need to act fast once you're inside." Nathan studied the plans, his mind already running scenarios. "I'll need weapons," he said. "On their way," Marcus replied. "A courier should be at your door in an hour. Sniper rifle, C4, and enough ammo to start a war. This is going to get loud, Cole." Nathan leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant. "Loud is fine, as long as it gets Layla out of there." Marcus hesitated, then added, "You've done the impossible before, Cole, but this is personal. You sure you're ready for this?" Nathan's jaw tightened. "I don't have a choice." When the weapons arrived, Nathan laid them out carefully on the bed, his hands steady, despite the tension simmering beneath the surface. He loaded the rifle, tested the detonators, and packed everything into a tactical bag. Sitting on the edge of the bed, Nathan took a deep breath and closed his eyes. Memories of past missions flooded his mind, missions where failure meant death for someone innocent. But this time, it wasn't just an innocent life on the line. It was Layla. He opened his eyes, his focus razor-sharp. "This ends tonight," he muttered, shouldering the bag and heading out into the night. The compound was alive with activity when Nathan arrived. Expensive cars lined the driveway, and well-dressed men and women filed into the grand entrance, their laughter and chatter carrying an undertone of malice. Dressed in a tailored suit he had acquired during his preparation, Nathan blended in seamlessly as he approached the security checkpoint. He handed over a forged invitation, keeping his expression neutral. The guard scanned the invitation, glanced at him, then waved him through. Nathan stepped inside, his heart pounding, but his face calm. The ballroom was lavishly decorated, a stark contrast to the horror unfolding within. Chandeliers cast a golden glow over the crowd, who sipped champagne and mingled as though they were at a charity gala. Nathan's eyes swept the room, taking in every detail. On the stage at the far end, several young women stood in a line, their expressions vacant. Nathan's stomach churned as he recognized the effects of sedatives. And then he saw her. Layla stood at the center of the line, her head bowed, her body swaying slightly. She was alive, but barely conscious. Razor strode onto the stage, his presence commanding. He raised his hands, silencing the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's main event. You've all been waiting for this." The room erupted in applause as Razor gestured to Layla. "Our star lot of the evening," he announced, "pure, untarnished, and perfect in every way. Starting bid, $100,000. Nathan's fists clenched at his sides, but he forced himself to remain composed. He couldn't act yet, not until he was sure Layla would be safe. He moved through the crowd, planting small explosive charges in strategic locations, the base of a support pillar beneath the buffet table, near the back entrance. His military training kept him calm and methodical, even as his rage boiled beneath the surface. With the last charge in place, Nathan retreated to the shadows, his eyes locked on Layla. The auction was nearing its peak, and he knew his window of opportunity was closing fast. Nathan slipped a small detonator from his pocket, his thumb hovering over the button. He took one last look at Layla, silently promising her that she'd be safe soon. Then he pressed it. The explosion was deafening, shaking the entire compound and plunging the ballroom into chaos. Guests screamed as smoke filled the air, and Razor's voice bellowed over the commotion. "Secure the girls! Find the intruder!" Nathan moved through the chaos with precision, his pistol drawn. A guard spotted him and raised his weapon, but Nathan fired first, taking him down with a single shot. He fought his way toward the stage, using the confusion to his advantage. Razor's men were disorganized, their attention divided between the explosions and the panicked buyers. Nathan climbed onto the stage, his eyes locking on Layla. She was still dazed, but her eyes flickered open slightly as he approached. "It's me, Layla," he said softly, cutting her restraints. "I've got you." Before he could carry her off, another explosion rocked the building, and the sound of reinforcements echoed from the hallway. Nathan gritted his teeth, preparing for the next wave of enemies. The ballroom had devolved into chaos as smoke and fire from Nathan's explosives spread through the compound. Shouts and gunfire echoed in every direction, but Nathan's focus was singular, getting Layla out alive. With Layla slumped over his shoulder, Nathan moved toward the exit, his pistol raised. He turned a corner and came face to face with Razor's elite guards, hardened, heavily armed men who moved with military precision. "Drop her!" one of them barked, leveling his rifle at Nathan. Nathan didn't hesitate. In a blur of motion, he fired twice, hitting one guard in the chest and another in the shoulder. The remaining guards charged at him, forcing him into hand-to-hand combat. Layla lay unconscious against the wall as Nathan unleashed years of training. He disarmed one man with a well-timed twist, driving his knee into the guard's stomach before flipping him onto the ground. Another guard lunged with a knife, but Nathan caught his wrist, twisting it until the blade clattered to the floor. The last guard, a hulking man with a swastika tattooed across his neck, sneered. "You don't belong here, boy!" he spat, lunging at Nathan with brute force. The words fueled Nathan's rage, but he stayed focused, dodging the man's punches and delivering precise, calculated blows. The fight was brutal, with both men exchanging strikes that left bruises and blood. Finally, Nathan slammed the man against the wall, pinning him with his forearm. "Where is Razor taking her?" Nathan growled, his voice cold and unrelenting. The man smirked through bloodied lips. "He's got a helicopter waiting. She's already gone." Nathan's fist connected with the man's jaw, knocking him out cold. Without wasting another second, Nathan scooped up Layla and sprinted toward the compound's helipad. Nathan emerged into the open air just in time to see Razor dragging Layla toward a waiting helicopter. She was barely conscious, her legs dragging behind her, as Razor barked orders at the pilot. "Get this thing off the ground now," Razor shouted, shoving Layla into the cabin. Nathan raised his pistol and fired, the bullets ricocheting off the helicopter's armored exterior. Razor turned, his scarred face twisting into a snarl as the helicopter began to lift off. "You're too late, Cole," Razor taunted, his voice booming over the sound of the rotors. Nathan sprinted toward the helipad, his eyes locked on Layla. The helicopter was several feet off the ground when he jumped, grabbing onto the skid with one hand. The force nearly tore him off, but he held on, pulling himself up with sheer determination. Razor leaned out of the cabin, aiming a rifle at Nathan. "You don't know when to quit, do you?" he sneered, firing a shot that narrowly missed Nathan's shoulder. Nathan swung himself upward, grabbing Razor's arm and yanking him off balance. The two men grappled at the edge of the helicopter, each struggling for control. Inside the cabin, the pilot shouted, "We're going down! Engines hit!" Nathan glanced at the rotor and saw smoke billowing from the engine. Razor's shots had caused enough damage to force the helicopter into a rapid descent. The helicopter spun wildly as it lost altitude, crashing into a clearing in the nearby woods. The impact was jarring, throwing Nathan and Razor clear of the wreckage. Nathan groaned as he pushed himself to his feet, his body aching from the fall. He turned to see Razor dragging Layla toward the edge of the clearing, a knife glinting in his hand. Nathan staggered forward, his legs heavy but his resolve unwavering. Razor turned to face him, using Layla as a human shield. The knife pressed against her throat sent a chill down Nathan's spine. "This is the end for you, Cole," Razor growled. "You should have stayed in your place. Now you get to watch your daughter die." Nathan's eyes locked onto Razor, his voice low and steady. "You're not walking out of here alive." Razor laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "And you think you are? You're just a desperate man clinging to false hope. You don't belong in my world." Nathan took a step forward, his hands raised. "Let her go. This is between you and me." Razor smirked, releasing Layla just enough to shove her aside. She fell to the ground, coughing and gasping for air. Nathan seized the moment, charging at Razor with everything he had. The fight was raw and brutal, two men driven by pure adrenaline and hatred. Razor swung the knife, but Nathan deflected the blow, landing a punch that sent Razor staggering backward. Razor recovered quickly, slashing at Nathan and grazing his arm. Pain flared, but Nathan didn't falter. He grabbed Razor's wrist, twisting it until the knife clattered to the ground. Razor roared in frustration, throwing wild punches, but Nathan's precision gave him the upper hand. With a final, devastating blow, Nathan drove Razor to the ground, pinning him. "You're done," Nathan said, his voice cold and final. Razor's eyes widened as Nathan delivered the finishing strike, ending the fight once and for all. Nathan stumbled through the debris, blood trickling down his arm from the earlier fight with Razor. His body ached, but his mind was singularly focused on one thing: finding Layla. "Layla!" Nathan called, his voice rough but loud enough to echo through the trees. A faint groan answered him, pulling his gaze toward the shattered remains of the helicopter. Pushing aside a jagged piece of the cabin, Nathan found her slumped in a corner, her head resting against the frame. Her skin was pale, her breaths shallow, but she was alive. "Layla," he said again, his voice trembling as he crouched beside her. Her eyelids fluttered open, and for a moment her drugged state made it difficult for her to focus. "Dad," she murmured, her voice faint but unmistakable. Nathan felt a flood of relief wash over him as he gently cradled her face. "It's me, sweetheart. You're safe now. I've got you." Tears welled in Layla's eyes as the reality of her father's presence began to sink in. "I thought I'd never see you again," she whispered. Nathan shook his head, lifting her carefully into his arms. "I'd go through hell and back for you, and I'll make sure no one ever hurts you again." As he carried her away from the wreckage, Nathan remained hyper-aware of his surroundings. Razor's men could still be out there hunting for him. His grip on Layla tightened protectively. "Just hold on, sweetheart," Nathan said softly. "We're almost out of here." Layla clung weakly to him, her tears soaking into his shirt. Despite her exhaustion, she managed to whisper, "Thank you, Dad." Nathan's throat tightened, but he forced himself to stay focused. "Don't thank me yet," he said, scanning the woods for signs of movement. "Let's get you home first." The forest began to thin as Nathan pushed forward, his steps steady, despite the weight of Layla in his arms. The distant hum of engines reminded him that time was running out. Razor's men would soon regroup, and Nathan needed to get as far away from the compound as possible. As they approached the edge of the woods, the faint glow of headlights appeared in the distance. Nathan tensed, but as the vehicle drew closer, he recognized the shape of an SUV. He exhaled in relief when the driver's side door opened and Marcus stepped out. "You look like hell," Marcus said, his usual smirk replaced by genuine concern. "Feel like it too," Nathan replied, carefully lowering Layla into the back seat. Marcus glanced at Layla, his expression softening. "She okay?" "She will be," Nathan said, climbing into the passenger seat. "Let's go." Marcus didn't waste any time, throwing the SUV into gear and speeding away from the compound. Nathan kept his eyes on the rearview mirror, watching for signs of pursuit. As they drove, flashing red and blue lights appeared in the distance, heading toward the compound. Nathan allowed himself a grim smile, knowing the authorities had finally been tipped off by the evidence he had sent earlier. "That's the cavalry," Marcus said, nodding toward the approaching police cars. "They're late," Nathan muttered. Layla stirred in the back seat, her voice barely audible. "Where are we going?" "Home," Nathan said, turning to look at her. "We're going home." Hours later, the SUV pulled into the driveway of a safe house Marcus had arranged. It was a modest cabin tucked away in the hills, far from the chaos they had left behind. Nathan carried Layla inside, settling her onto the couch. She was still groggy, but beginning to regain some strength. "Get some rest," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You're safe here." Layla reached for his hand, her grip weak but steady. "Dad, how did you find me?" Nathan sat beside her, his shoulders slumping for the first time since the ordeal began. "I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. Not until I had you back." Tears filled Layla's eyes as she whispered, "I was so scared." Nathan leaned closer, his voice firm but gentle. "No one is ever going to hurt you again. I promise." For a moment, the weight of everything he had endured began to settle on him. The fights, the close calls, the blood on his hands. It was all worth it to see his daughter safe. Nathan closed his eyes, his mind replaying the events of the past 24 hours. He had faced death, corruption, and pure evil. But he had come out on the other side, with Layla in his arms. "You're my world," he said quietly, his voice filled with emotion. "And I'll always protect you, no matter what." Layla's hand tightened around his, her eyes shining with gratitude. "I love you, Dad." Nathan smiled, a rare, genuine smile. "I love you too, Layla." As the first rays of dawn broke through the window, Nathan sat beside his daughter, finally allowing himself a moment of peace. Nathan sat at the small desk in the safe house, his laptop open as he uploaded the last batch of incriminating files. Every document, video, and photo he had gathered during his mission was now securely sent to Marcus, who had already begun forwarding it to trusted contacts within federal agencies and media outlets. "You sure about this?" Marcus asked, his voice coming through Nathan's phone on speaker. "Once this hits the news, it's going to blow up. A lot of people will go down, and you'll have a target on your back." Nathan stared at the screen, his jaw tightening. They need to go down. Every single one of them. The sheriff, Razor's buyers, the whole operation. They don't get to walk away from this. Within hours, the first headlines began appearing. Trafficking ring exposed in Coldwater, one read. Another declared, sheriff and officials linked to human trafficking scandal. Nathan leaned back in his chair, watching as the media storm unfolded. News anchors dissected the evidence, showing footage of Razor's compound and naming prominent figures involved in the operation. Federal authorities announced the arrest of Razor's surviving lieutenants and the corrupt officials who had turned a blind eye for years. The sheriff's face appeared on the screen, a mugshot capturing his fall from power. Nathan felt a grim satisfaction as the anchor described how federal agents had raided the Coldwater police station, finding further evidence of collusion with Razor's gang. Marcus called again, his tone lighter this time. They're unraveling, Cole. You did it. The task force is already dismantling the rest of the network. Nathan's grip on the phone tightened. It's not about me. It's about making sure no one else goes through what Layla did. Marcus paused. And her? How's she holding up? Nathan glanced toward the living room where Layla was curled up on the couch, resting peacefully. She's getting there, he said softly. The storm Nathan had unleashed wouldn't undo the trauma, but it would ensure justice. For Layla. For every girl who had suffered at the hands of Razor's gang. The days that followed were quiet but heavy with the weight of healing. Layla stayed close to Nathan, her once bright demeanor now subdued. The shadows in her eyes told a story Nathan could never fully understand, but he vowed to do everything in his power to help her move forward. Therapy might help, Nathan suggested gently one evening as they sat on the porch of the safe house. Layla hesitated, looking down at her hands. I don't know if I'm ready to talk about it. You don't have to talk about it all at once, Nathan said, his voice steady. But you don't have to carry it alone either. I'll be with you every step of the way. Layla nodded slowly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Okay, Dad, I'll try. With Nathan's encouragement, Layla began attending therapy sessions. The first few were difficult, her words halting and hesitant. But over time, she started to open up. The therapist helped her unpack the trauma, piece by piece, and Layla began to find her voice again. Nathan surrounded her with love and support, bringing in trusted friends and family to create a safe and comforting environment. Layla's aunts visited often, filling the house with warmth and laughter. Her cousins brought her small gifts and reminders of the life waiting for her beyond the shadows of her ordeal. One afternoon, Layla sat at the kitchen table sketching in a notebook, a hobby she had abandoned before the trip to Coldwater. Nathan paused in the doorway, watching her quietly. Drawing again? He asked, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. Layla looked up, her expression shy but hopeful. Yeah, it feels good, like I'm finding myself again. Nathan walked over, placing a hand on her shoulder. You're stronger than you know, Layla, and you're not alone. For the first time in weeks, Layla smiled, a real, genuine smile that filled Nathan's heart with hope. The sun filtered through the curtains as Nathan stood in the kitchen, flipping pancakes on the stove. The smell of coffee and maple syrup filled the air, and for a moment, everything felt normal again. Layla wandered in, still in her pajamas, her hair slightly messy. She rubbed her eyes and sat at the table, watching her father with a soft smile. "Since when do you cook breakfast?" she teased. "Since I needed an excuse to keep you out of the kitchen," Nathan replied, setting a plate of pancakes in front of her. Layla laughed, the sound light and musical. It was a sound Nathan had missed more than he realized. As they ate, Layla looked up at him, her expression serious but full of gratitude. "Thank you, Dad, for everything, for saving me." Nathan set his fork down, meeting her gaze. "You don't ever have to thank me for that, Layla. You're my daughter. I'd do it all over again if I had to." Tears welled in her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. "I love you," she said softly. "I love you too," Nathan replied, his voice thick with emotion. They spent the rest of the day in quiet companionship, playing cards and watching old movies. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Nathan allowed himself to relax, knowing Layla was safe and healing. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Nathan sat on the porch watching Layla sketch in her notebook. The scars of their ordeal would take time to fade, but in that moment, Nathan felt at peace. He had fought for her, bled for her, and now he could finally begin to rebuild their lives together. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the story, please give this video a like and subscribe for more.